Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the November edition of what I watched in cinemas this month. The year is coming to an end, and so is this series. And November was actually supposed to be a pretty easy breezy month in terms of the movies I was going to watch, the amount of movies I was going to watch. There were not that many new releases that interested me. I was planning to initially watch like 4 to 5 films in all of November, hoping to rewatch if I ended up really liking or loving some of them. But then came the swarm of re releases and catching up to some films from October, and November just surprisingly became an incredibly stacked month for movies. So, this is going to be a pretty lengthy video, I think. So, buckle up, strap in, and here we go. The first time I watched in theaters in November was Bugonia. That feeling of one of your most anticipated films actually living up to the hype is indescribable because this film was simply incredible. I've been waiting to see this film ever since I heard it was being made, and I consider it a privilege to have gotten to see a Yorgos Lanthimos film in a movie theater. Given the moral policing of the Indian censor board, and given that none of his films have released here in India, I mean, at least since I became a fan of his. So to see Begonia playing in theaters in India came across as a shock to me, but most certainly a welcome one. And though me loving the film was not at all shocking, it's just an incredible feeling when one of your favorite filmmakers unsurprisingly knocks it out of the park once again. Now, Begonia is surprisingly Lanthimos' least strange film, and that's insane given that this film is pretty fucking strange. But for the most part, this film feels much more real and grounded than you'd expect to see from this director. But its themes of humanity, online news, conspiracy theories, and childhood trauma are very apparent and really well done here. It's an incredibly topical and relevant film that takes a surprisingly bleak and cynically hopeful approach, if that makes sense. It honestly depends on how you individually perceive it, but it was certainly interesting to see a film like this not leaving us with hope as one would expect. Its pessimistic outlook on humanity is one I can actually get behind. I have no notes on the film when it comes to its technical aspects. Lanthimos revels in his unique style that he has very clearly mastered. Robbie Ryan's cinematography results in this looking gorgeous in every frame. After The Brutalist and One Battle After Another, this movie is in the list of films bringing back the glorious format of VistaVision, which adds to why this film feels like it has a very specific texture and tangibility to its images. And Jerskin Fendrix's eerily acute score perfectly fits Lanthimos' tonal aesthetic while also sounding grand and operatic as if it were a Spielberg movie at certain moments that occasionally breaks away from the specific strangeness of the overall soundtrack. The empathy with which it treats its characters is honestly beautiful because these people are neither good nor bad. Maybe they're not that good either, but the film shows us their side of the story, even if it's for a little bit, to at least make us understand, if not care about them. Plus, Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons are simply terrific here. Honestly speaking, this might just be my personal favorite Jesse Plemons performance, and it's nice to see these two added to Lanthimos' roster because they perfectly fit into his freaky little universes. There's one bold choice in the film that did make me question what the film's actual intent was. It's the one aspect of the film that threw me for a toss and left me decoding the film all over again. But though I'm still wrapping my head around it, it most certainly made for an incredibly interesting creative choice. And it's always admirable to see a film take risks and go places that you never expected to go. Bugonia, in my opinion, is no less than a stone cold masterpiece that most definitely looks and feels like a Yorgos Lanthimos film, but also feels like a Lanthimos film we have never seen before. He's somehow able to make films that feel like it's exactly his, while also making them feel new. The man has made 3 bangers back to back in just the past 3 years, so you know what? He deserves the break he's taken, and I can't wait for his return because I'm sure his next cinematic venture will be just as interesting, if not as great, as Bugonia was. And that last needle drop is just a genius choice, in my opinion. Its final scene and last shot will stay with me for a pretty long time. Bāhubali the Epic. I am not being hyperbolic when I say that this is one of my most cherished and favorite theatrical experiences this year. 4 hours of absolute cinema helmed by titans of the medium. The Bahubali films are some of my favorites from Indian cinema, and watching them both as one combined film in IMAX was honestly a religious and heavenly experience. The Bahubali films are one of the few Indian films that has permanently remained etched in our public consciousness since its initial release. Whenever a new large-scale, high-budget, massy commercial action blockbuster Indian film comes out, it's almost always inevitably compared to Bahubali, especially if it's also a period film. And I don't blame audiences for making that comparison to an extent, because Bahubali has set a new standard for the kind of films that are possible to make with these high budgets. It showed us that commercial films don't have to dumb things down, that intelligently written and crafted films are what we audiences deserve, especially when it's made with that much money. Bahubali is a film that dared to dream big and achieve that dream with top-notch execution. It made us expect better films from our respective industries. It showed us that we don't have to accept lazily made films just because it's large scale and has a superstar in it. It made us want better films from these superstars, and Rajamouli and team are the ones responsible for setting that new bar that high up. Though there have been only a few good, high-budget commercial Indian action films since Bahubali, few to none have managed to capture the magic that Bahubali did. Funnily enough, the only film that did seem to do so, in my opinion, was Rajamouli's own RRR. Now, though I personally think RRR is his best film, I completely understand why someone would like Bahubali more. But either way, it only goes to show how incredible a filmmaker Rajamouli is. His imagination truly knows no bounds. Now, as for this 4-hour iteration of Bahubali, I obviously had an absolute blast watching it. In the IMAX showing I was in, the sound was really fucking loud, which honestly completely worked for me, given that this is a larger-than-life action blockbuster. And it was so nice to see the image fill the entire IMAX screen. It really added to making the film feel like a momentous experience that was much bigger than you and I. Now, given that both the Bahubali films add up to almost 6 hours of runtime, and since this cut is pretty much 4 hours, there's almost 2 whole hours of footage absent. And so when the pacing did feel kind of clunky and few character beats felt lacking, I really wasn't surprised. And I can't even say I blame the makers, because what else could they have done? Cutting out a few unnecessary songs and action beats was fine, but even though I understand the plight of the makers, condensing scenes through narration and cutting out some character moments does hinder the overall film a little bit. But this is far from surprising, given that releasing a 6-hour cut would have been next to impossible, even if I personally would have no problem watching it. And since it's been many years since I have watched these films, some of its problematic politics does make itself more apparent to me now. I'm someone who loves the film despite it, but I would also recommend you read the article The Rape of Avantika to understand what I'm talking about. Given that this is a film primarily about high-ranking royalties and their conflicts with power and ruling kingdoms, I'm sadly not surprised to see problematic depictions of romance, animal cruelty, etc. And given everything, Bahubali still stands tall as one of the finest and most entertaining commercial films from this country. Its commitment to creating dazzlingly iconic imagery through the unabashed power of imagination is unparalleled. Rajamouli is someone who prioritizes emotion more than logic, and while that does warrant some criticism for certain scenes, is honestly an approach I really respect that completely works for the medium of cinema. The pure conviction with which he's able to execute the wildest and craziest of ideas actually ends in the audience feeling what he wants us to feel, instead of it coming across as cringe that's trying too hard. Obviously, aspects like good special effects, wire work, music, and shot choices make up a good chunk of well-executed high-concept ideas, but it's primarily Rajamouli's conviction and confidence in his ideas that pave the way for the rest of the technical aspects to elevate it. This is exactly why the film has one memorable moment after another. I kid you not, the audience I was with were cheering and celebrating every 5 to 10 minutes or so. It's because the film has such high-octane moments one after the other, while never sacrificing the quiet moments of character that the film would not have worked without. The action set pieces obviously work because of their conceptualization and execution, but they are also effective because the film has done the work to make us care about its characters. Rajamouli is sadly one of the few Indian filmmakers who gets this. He always puts the drama and the emotion of the scenes first, only then does he decide how to bring that to life to make us feel those emotions he wants us to feel. Which is why Bahubali is not just an exhilarating film but also an incredibly moving one. Yes, it has ridiculously exaggerated action sequences and larger-than-life emotions, but I have found myself almost in tears in some of its scenes. You probably know which one I'm talking about. It's one of the big reasons why this film turned out to be such a huge success. Watching a large-scale film without characters we care about doesn't work, because then the image on screen becomes nothing more than just empty noise. And of course, I can't forget the work of legends like DOP Senthil Kumar and composer M.M. Keeravani. Kumar lends a much needed stylization to this kind of film. Every single shot and camera move is ambitious and intentional. The way he uses fire as a light source to create drama by lighting the face of fantastic performers is masterful. And Keeravani is responsible for legitimately creating one of the best musical scores I have ever heard for a film. He understands that simply a loud and grand piece of music isn't enough. That becomes stale and generic very soon. Instead, he creates memorable leitmotifs for characters, places, and themes, and reuses different versions of those pieces according to their respective scenes to evoke the necessary feelings within us. As you can see, I've already talked about this movie a whole lot, and if I wanted to, I could honestly talk about this movie for hours and hours, and I don't think I'll ever quite run out of things to adore in this film because there's just so much to admire and appreciate. When a great film comes my way, I just can't help but gush about it. But at the end of the day, Bāhubali isn't just a name that the people of Mahishmati haven't forgotten, but one that we audiences have also remembered and cherished over the past decade, and getting to relive this monumental cinematic achievement on the big screen is something I'm honestly quite grateful for. It's one of the best Indian mythological epics that we have ever had that inspired not just millions of people, but filmmakers and storytellers, for it gave them the courage to dream bigger and bolder. Then I watched probably the raddest film of 2025, Predator Badlands. Judging from the trailers, this looked incredibly mediocre, but I'm honestly surprised to have actually enjoyed this one quite a bit. It's really nice to see the ninth installment of a multi-million-dollar franchise critique toxic masculinity and alpha males who view women as nothing but tools, breaking down the systems that disguise suicide and murder as quote-unquote honor and patriotism. It's pretty well made, the action is creative at times, but working in tandem with actually good writing, it makes many scenes honestly really badass that work because of its filmmaking and character arcs. The special effects, creature designs, and sound design is really excellent. It's not a great movie by any measure, but it's most certainly a fun time at the movies. It's one of the more pleasant surprises of the year, to be honest. The Girlfriend. This, again, is also genuinely one of the more pleasant surprises of the year. The film honestly didn't really interest me from the trailer, plus I had the misconception that this would be just another misogynistic film, but little did I know that this would be a deeply moving feminist tale about learning to fight back against the parasite of patriarchy. It's really well shot and performed, along with some stellar music that stitches many moments together seamlessly. Some of the dream sequences really shine, but ultimately, this is an enraging film, and I mean that as a compliment. It's a film that truthfully depicts and critiques the cruelty and deeply inherent misogyny present in countless problematic men who mostly just have unresolved mommy issues. And it's exactly the kind of film we need right now, given how so many films being produced are the kinds that tap into these very violent testosterone impulses, that take the fragile male ego and glorify it on the big screen to satiate the self-imposed righteousness of other insecure men. It's just so wonderful to see a film about women that has nothing but respect and empathy for these very women. It's not a film that pedestalizes them to a devotional degree, it just depicts them as flesh and blood human beings with flaws and dreams who just happen to be oppressed by controlling men. The film does an excellent job at making us root for the protagonist while also not looking down on her when she is struggling or vulnerable. It makes us feel her imprisonment and want her to fight back against this patriarchal system that chains her purely because she's a woman. The film stays emotionally riveting throughout its 2.5 hour runtime, plus it's really nice to finally see Rashmika Mandanna be given an actual good role in a 2025 film. Spider-Man 2. Getting to see this in a theater is a dream come true moment for me. It is quite literally perfect in every conceivable way. It's less of a superhero film and more of a human drama that happens to be about a superhero. Yes, the action and special effects are all stellar and top notch, but I love that the film never once sacrifices the beautifully quiet moments of contemplation, regret, and longing. It understands that for the larger than life moments to work, we have to care about and empathize with the characters at stake. And if I start raving about the filmmaking, I just might never stop. If there's a motherfucker who knows how to move the camera, it's Sam Raimi. This is undoubtedly my favorite superhero and or comic book film ever, and is in my top 10 favorite films of all time, given how crucial this film has been in shaping me into the person that I am today. It has changed my life for the better and is the film I revisit to feel less lonely. They really don't make them like they used to. Om Shanti Om. Watching this in a packed theater is one of the better decisions I've made this year. The entire hall erupting into cheers and applause every few minutes at some iconic scene or song. This is precisely how this film is meant to be experienced. As for the film, what's there to say that hasn't been said? It's a revered classic and for damn good reason. An operatic and melodramatic drama full of concepts such as reincarnations and revenge. It has got all the essential elements needed for a commercial film, yet executes it with such undying conviction and love for the medium of film that it truly becomes something special. It's one of the few Hindi films that has aged really well, given the film is almost 20 years old. But what can I say? It really is that good. Unabashed in its reverence for masala cinema, aided by genuinely controlled filmmaking and an immaculately well-written script that really elevates this from a typical commercial outing. And apart from all that, at the end of the day, it's just an honestly moving piece of romantic cinema that's rightfully acclaimed as a classic. Quintessential movie magic in every sense of the word. Spider-Man 3. I expectedly loved this more upon rewatch. It's gorgeously shot, the character moments are brilliant, and I think it's brave for Raimi to take Peter's arc in the direction that he did after Spider-Man 2. Overall, I quite liked the main character's arcs, but the film is still a bloated mess, filled with wonderful ideas that are never explored to their fullest potential. It's overstuffed with too many characters and suffers from evident pacing issues. You can tell which part of the story Raimi was actually interested in and which parts he was forced to do by the studio. And despite its well-known problems, I still love this film. Maybe it's a bit of nostalgia bias, but I honestly believe that this is a great movie. It has genuinely compelling human drama with characters I have great emotional attachment to. The action is mostly really creative and well executed, and despite how messy it is, the quiet and beautiful ending really saves this thing. Plus, it's incredibly cheesy and corny, and I love that about it. It's part of the charm of Raimi's movies. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that this film is still better than most comic book films that we see today. It's not perfect, but it still has more heart and earnestness than most of the MCU. It's undoubtedly the weakest of the trilogy, but still a befitting end to it, and I'm honestly really glad that I caught this in cinemas, though I wouldn't mind seeing a Spider-Man 4 from Raimi, even though I know that's never gonna happen. Now you see me, now you don't. I don't have much to say about this, except that I love these silly and stupid movies so fucking much, and I want 50 more of them right now. Spider-Man. The quintessential superhero origin story that is still difficult to top. It's actually insane how Sony chose a well-known horror filmmaker to direct their superhero film. But it's a risky move I'm so glad they made, else we would not have gotten one of the best comic book films ever put to screen. It's crazy to see this confident of a superhero film before they even became popular. It's stylistic, corny, and cheesy in all the right ways, but its earnestness permeates throughout every frame. Raimi's love for the source material and characters is highly evident in the beautiful writing, filled with fleshed out characters who feel like real people that we have grown up with. Rewatching this film always reminds me of just how iconic it is. But I don't just love it because of my childhood nostalgia. It is a solid singular film that's not just a damn good time, but also a moving drama with a character arc for the protagonist that's perfect for the first installment of a budding blockbuster franchise. There are very few comic book films, let alone origin story films, that match the inventiveness and sincerity of this film. A masterpiece in its own regard, as not just a film that gave rise to the superhero movie genre, but a great film that holds up on its own. It's just batshit insane how Raimi did such a spectacular job in this film, and with the sequel, he did it better. The Running Man. Unsurprisingly, this was a really fun time at the movies. Given that it's an Edgar Wright film, I expected nothing less. Glenn Powell and Wright seem like the perfect actor-director pair, and it really worked out because the film is a blast. Though I didn't get much of what I had expected stylistically, in terms of Wright's usual quick and creative editing full of inventive match cuts and transitions. Don't get me wrong, those are there, but not as much as I had hoped. But despite that, I still think that this is an incredibly well-made movie. And though I had hoped to love the movie, after sitting with it for a while, I sadly don't. I really like it, and it's most definitely really entertaining. It lacks something in its internal core that kept me from being moved. It gets a bit too bloated as it goes along with multiple characters that come and go quickly, barely getting time to make an impact before the plot chugs along instantly. And even the plot becomes more convoluted, especially towards the third act. Plus, I'm not a huge fan of how this film looks either. Not to say that it looks ugly, but the grading has this visually dull and almost colorless aesthetic, which is the opposite of what this delightfully vibrant film needed. Now, I didn't expect just how politically charged the film was going to be. From scene 1, the film ensures it gets its critique of the class divide evident, how the working class are treated as cannon fodder by the elite upper class. It's a wonderfully unsubtle depiction of the capitalist hellish landscape that is modern America, that disguises its corruption through spreading its propaganda with the help of the media and entertainment industry, where underprivileged human lives have zero value apart from the mild amusement they can provide to the uber rich. Which was honestly enraging to see, and exactly what was needed for me to immediately empathize with the protagonist of the film. And though I do feel like its themes of political awareness and social uprising were a pleasant surprise, it was way too rushed to feel impactful. I absolutely loved its communist ideas, but the writing needed more solid foundation for it to feel like a natural progression of the story. But despite everything, I'm glad that the film didn't disappoint. I say this because of the chatter about the film online wasn't too positive, which made me afraid that I wouldn't like the film too much either. Thankfully, I really enjoyed it, though I do understand why some people may not have liked this film. It's thematically and structurally very messy. It's far from my favorite Edgar Wright film, but I'm glad I got to see one of his movies in theaters. The Godfather Part 3. After watching this in theaters, I have finally finished rewatching the entire trilogy and I couldn't be more glad. But if I'm being honest, this wasn't as great as I had remembered. Though I definitely think this film is overhated, I surprisingly happened to kinda love it when I first saw it. Back then, I actually had liked this more than Part 2, which makes absolutely zero sense to me now. But after this rewatch, it sadly wasn't very great, especially given its predecessors are quite literally the greatest films ever made. It's got some likable elements for sure, decent performances, except for Sofia Coppola, she was really bad. The movie looks good, it's well made, and the final opera set piece really was something. But I didn't find myself feeling much of anything, to be honest. The spark and magic of the first two films seems to be lost here, and I hate to say it, but I surprisingly found myself to be a little bored for a decent chunk of the film. The only time I did feel something was when the original characters were reminiscing about the earlier films. Not only because of my nostalgia for those movies, but because we see how the events of those films have now left an impact on our characters. It's pretty much the only time I felt any emotional investment throughout the film. And I can't say I blame Coppola for this. Watching this film, I can tell that his heart wasn't set on making it. He had to for financial reasons. But it's honestly commendable how he still managed to make a good film, despite not really wanting to make it in the first place. It's a true testament to just how good a filmmaker he really is. Kaantha. This film really came out of nowhere and blew me away. I walked into it completely clueless, and to be honest, that's exactly how I think you should watch this film if you haven't already. I didn't see any of the trailers or read anything about the film. I had just heard that it's good, and so I decided to give it a shot, and I am so glad that I did. Since I didn't know what the film was about, every 20 minutes or so, the film kept on pulling the rug from under me as I tried to decode what it was really about. If I were to speak about the technical aspects of the film, it's damn near perfect. The filmmaking is genuinely stellar, frenetic camera moves, gorgeous lighting and compositions, along with interesting use of lensing, really elevate the film's quality. There's some poor digital background rendering, but it's a minor issue, to be honest. And since I went into this film blind, there was honestly not a single second where I wasn't hooked, as the film continued to surprise me moment after moment, especially in the second half, where the film completely skips genres and goes from engaging to exhilarating. Either way, I love that the film manages to maintain its focus on the medium of cinema and how it's an incredibly powerful medium capable of changing people and how they perceive the world and people around them. It shows us the ruthlessness of the business side of filmmaking, where deadlines have to be met and egos clash constantly. But it also shows the magical side of filmmaking, where we see multiple artists of different skill sets coming together to make something personal amidst all the commerce and economics of the industry. Though it isn't a movie that talks about the magic of the movies, as the genre becomes that of a thriller, it still retains this element and doesn't forget about the medium at the center of it all. I wouldn't call it a perfect film, far from it in fact, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't have a wonderful time at the cinema. Engaging, delightfully deranged at times, but ultimately moving. One of the more pleasant surprises of the year, and I would love to see the audience showing this some love at the box office, for it truly deserves it. The Amazing Spider-Man. I'm honestly a little surprised that I like this more than before. The Amazing Spider Man movies have never really been my favorite Spider Man films. There are aspects about it that I have admired, but they have never emotionally resonated with me. And though it still isn't my favorite iteration of the character, I still really enjoyed this film. Maybe it's the added fact that I saw it in a packed theater with an excited audience full of devoted fans of these films, but seeing everyone cheer for Spider Man is something that's easy to swoon me with. It's still an incredibly flawed film. We know next to nothing about Gwen as a character. The antagonist is fascinating but becomes generic really quickly, and though it recounts many plot points and emotional beats from the original Spider Man movie, it still has an interesting arc for Peter that's mildly different from that of Tobey's iteration. Technically, the film still holds up, the special effects are genuinely incredible, Lizard and CG Spidey look breathtakingly real, and that's insane because the MCU Spidey, with the advantage of more advanced special effects and a bigger budget, still looks like a PlayStation 3D model at times when he's full CG. The filmmaking is pretty solid too. Few inventive shots, good set design, and simple but stellar lighting honestly feel kind of refreshing to see in a superhero film, weirdly enough. Maybe it's because my bar with this genre is so low, with poorly done VFX and artificial looking green screens, that it feels like a breath of fresh air to see a film shot on location that looks and feels real. And that score is surprisingly much better than I remembered. It's almost as iconic as Danny Elfman's Spider-Man score. It really elevates many scenes and makes the film feel like a grand yet personally grounded superhero epic. But the primary reason for me enjoying this film comes from my childhood nostalgia. I'm able to forgive the film's many flaws because I did feel like I was a little kid once again in that theater 12 years ago. I felt giddy when Spider Man shows up on the screen for the first time, with the entire hall screaming and cheering for his first appearance. He's not my ideal Spider Man, but he is still Spider Man, and no matter how messy the film is, my love and undying reverence for this character makes me have a soft spot for this lovely little film. The Amazing Spider Man 2. I have always considered this to be my least favorite Spider Man film, and after this rewatch, that mostly still remains to be the case. But I'm honestly surprised to have liked this film a little more after seeing it again. It's probably because of my Spider Man bias, and because of the fact that I saw this film in a completely full and packed hall filled with excited fans who were screaming and cheering in so many moments. I've always had issues with this film, and those issues still remain. Peter Parker's secret agent parents subplot is stupid as shit, and so are Harry and Electro as the villains. Really poorly executed antagonists with a few interesting ideas conceptually, but are barely memorable. Even the writing of Peter and Gwen's relationship is mediocre, with their delightfully honest performances making it watchable. Ignoring the opening plane sequence, this film starts out strong and ends strong. I suppose that's why it has left such a strong impact on audiences. And I get it, because I really dug the beginning and conclusion of the film too, but everything in the middle feels so impersonal and studio mandated that it's hard to love the film. Despite that, I would still say that there's lots to love about this film. It looks good, the film shoots Andrew and Emma as if they are the most beautiful people alive, and you know what, that makes sense. The special effects are undoubtedly incredible, that Spider-Man's suit is genuinely perfect. It might just be my favorite live-action Spidey suit. Aunt May leaves a solid impact in the few scenes that she's in, and I wanted her to have more, and those swinging sequences are god tier. Though I have a preference towards the Raimi films, I would say that the swinging scenes of this film are just as good, if not better. It has a staggeringly good blend of conceptualization and visual effects to make Spidey swinging feel heroic, yet realistic and full of weight. Plus, the score is actually really good. Apart from the hilarious electro dubstep, Spidey's new theme is iconic and still can be recognized today. Plus, I would say that this film has more sauce in terms of its filmmaking than the previous film. Though I like TASM 1 more than this film, there are more creative shots and sequences executed with sometimes spectacular filmmaking and VFX that is still remembered today, which is why I knew at exactly which moments the audiences would begin cheering. The direction feels like it has a little more voice, despite the fact that Sony butchered this film from the get-go. And as everyone probably agrees, Peter and Gwen are the heart and soul of these movies, and while I don't love their writing, Andrew and Emma elevate the mediocre material and manage to make me care and empathize with their characters. Which is why, despite my opinion on the film, in the final minutes, I am just as moved as everyone else. My childhood nostalgia and my existing love for this character still managed to make me feel something when the film ended, despite me not liking the film too much overall. In spite of all of its countless problems, in the end, the film still gets the character right and what he stands for. It's a beautiful high note to end on, which leaves me looking at this film a tad bit more favorably than I would have otherwise. And I honestly don't want to beat on this dead horse. It's weird because despite me not liking the film that much, I still enjoyed myself and found myself genuinely emotional at times. And honestly, that just left me leaving more sad at the potential this film truly had it being great. My sympathies towards Mark Webb has always been prevalent since I watched these films. He's a good filmmaker with a fresh and interesting vision for Spider-Man, and he definitely loves this character. That love for the source material still manages to creep in through the studio mandated creative choices. The movie still felt like it had a beating heart full of warmth, though it was barely functioning, which is probably why I liked the film a little more upon this rewatch. I just wish he got to make these two films without his vision being tampered by Sony. There was so much potential that was simply thrown away by the wishes of the studio that was more interested in selling toys and keeping the rights to this character than to tell an actual meaningful story with him. But still, I am glad that many have still resonated with this iteration of Spidey, as was clear by all the applause and cheering that I witnessed in the theater. Though he is not my favorite interpretation of this character, it's wonderful that Andrew is still many other people's Spider-Man, and despite what I think of the film, that's a beautiful thing. Sisu wrote a revenge. It is a deeply sillier, bigger, and most certainly better than the first film. This film looks gorgeous and is as stylish as its predecessor. My main reason for enjoying this as much as I did was because of the improved action compared to the first film, as well as the added emotional stakes that made this so much more entertaining to watch. Its narrative is deceptively simple and the action sequences are incredibly over the top, but I've realized that it's part of the charm of this series. The sheer conviction with which they execute some of the most batshit insane ideas is honestly what makes it so much fun to watch, apart from the delightfully cartoonish gore and bloodshed. It makes no sense half the time, but it doesn't matter because it's rad as fuck. It's really enjoyable and is just as long as it needs to be. It knows exactly what kind of film it is and is unabashedly unapologetic about it. I honestly wouldn't mind seeing another one of this, to be honest. Spider-Man Far From Home. I've always considered this film to be one of my least favorite Spider-Man films, despite being a film I quite enjoy. And that still kind of remains to be the case. I have quite a few issues with the film that are still prevalent despite me having seen this a few years ago. Peter's love for MJ comes out of nowhere, the supporting characters are paper thin, so is the romance between Peter and MJ. They're only fun to watch because of the actors who perfectly depict the awkwardness of adolescent teenagers. It has the usual Marvel bathhouse moments where emotional scenes with weight are undercut with a joke. The subplots regarding Peter's class trip feel random and aimless. The filmmaking is mostly subpar with only a few inventive shot choices and camera movements. There's also one very important scene, which is really fun to watch due to Jake Gyllenhaal's performance, but suffers from a major exposition problem which makes little to no sense in the internal logic of the film. But despite everything, just like my experience rewatching every other Spider-Man movie this month, I liked this film a little more upon rewatch. I found more things to admire than I did before. Conceptually, I like the idea of Peter's arc moving on from Endgame. Though it's not executed to its fullest potential, it's the ideal next step in Peter's journey. The special effects and action sequences are genuinely solid. There are only a few times where full CG Spider-Man feels like a weightless 3D model floating around, but for the most part, I really was enthralled by the creativity and scale of the final action set piece, where good choreography is perfectly blended with staggeringly good VFX. And the Mysterio illusion scene is undoubtedly my favorite scene of the film. Not only is it visually a blast, but it's also filled with incredibly inventive imagery, aided by the emotional weight it holds, as all of Peter's accumulated fears throughout the film come together in an explosively haunting and colorful sequence. At the end of the day, I was entertained, and it's far from the best superhero movie and most definitely far from the best Spider-Man movie. It may not be my least favorite Spider-Man movie, but it's probably my least favorite of the Holland trilogy. And that's okay. I have my favorites to revisit from time to time, and this doesn't have to be the best iteration. It's a good movie where I had fun watching it despite its many flaws. Zootopia 2. I had always thought that this would be some kind of typical Disney sequel cash grab that would try to replicate the magic of the first film, but would end up being nothing more than an empty and soulless studio mandated corporate product. And man, am I so glad that I was wrong, because this movie is just fantastic. Over the past week, I'd heard nothing but love and praise for this film online, which honestly really shocked me, given how Disney, especially Disney Animation, has disappointed me with their recent slate of films. And this film is rightfully deserving of all the acclaim coming its way. It's not just a solid film, but a great sequel that progresses its themes and characters in a way that feels natural, while also being a relevant social commentary about racism and settler colonialism. The animation is stellar, it's got inventive jokes, not just in terms of animal puns, but also great visual gags. I just love seeing these characters back for a film that actually feels like there was love and care put behind it. A film that uses its commercial accessibility to talk about real world problems, while also not losing sight of its characters' personal journeys. Come to think of it, this is the only recent Disney animated film in a long time that actually made me feel a glimpse of the magic I used to feel from their earlier films. I would love to see another Zootopia film if they carry on crafting these movies with love and care, just like they did for the last two films. Spider-Man No Way Home. I saw it in IMAX after 4 entire years, and it just hit me all over again how miraculous it is that this film exists. If you told me that this film would be made many years ago, I would hardly believe you. But experiencing this on a huge screen really put into perspective just how huge an event this was when it came out all the way back in 2021. If you don't already know, I really love this movie. It's not at all great and is incredibly flawed, and I have tons of issues with it, and yet I still love this movie. But before I talk about why I adore it, here are my many problems with it. Considering how packed the film is, the direction and visual aesthetic is sadly but unsurprisingly bland. The filmmaking barely has any voice, and the film lacks some much needed stylization and visual flair. Though the Tarzan movies aren't my favorite, even those movies had some inventiveness in its filmmaking in depicting Spider-Man. And though I quite like the dynamic trio of Peter, MJ, and Ned in this film, the latter two are still heavily underdeveloped characters who have no personality or character outside of Peter. I still don't know who they are as people, they are just Peter Parker's friends, nothing more. The VFX is 50-50 for me, honestly, because half the time it's really great, and the other half the time, the characters just feel like weightless CG models being flung around without any sense of stakes or gravitas. Plus, the dull color grading and obvious green screens aren't doing the movie any favors either. Though I liked Aunt May here, her character feels completely different from who she was in Homecoming and in Far From Home. It's as if she suddenly just became this ideal role model of innate goodness out of nowhere. She does feel like the quintessential Aunt May here, it's just that she wasn't like this at all before, and this sudden shift felt jarring and contrived. There are quite a bunch of logical plot stuff that doesn't make much sense when you sit and think about it, be it multiversal plot logic or the villain's motivations. It's not like the specifics of plot really matters to me if I'm being honest, but since this wasn't my first watch, I found myself asking a lot of questions about how things work. Plus, the film does suffer from a tonal problem, as most MCU films do. It doesn't properly balance the dramatic scenes with the comedic scenes, often sacrificing the weight of a serious scene for a few laughs, which is something that Marvel does that still bothers me. The film just doesn't know when to take itself seriously. Well, most of the time. But despite all that, this is still a film I immensely enjoyed the hell out of. Though it's far from perfect, I do feel a sense of personal connection with this film. Maybe it's the Spider-Man bias, I can't deny that, and I shouldn't either. But there's just a lot that this movie gets right. The film has a strong first act. It does suffer from a lot of problems, bland filmmaking and a confused tone, for example, but I still like the fact that it focuses on the harsh aftermath of Far From Home's ending and develops the friendship between Peter, MJ, and Ned. Some of the action sequences are pretty strong. In the few moments where it doesn't feel like an explosion of CG sludge everywhere, I actually felt the impact of the fight scenes, mainly in the ones with the Green Goblin, who was a manic delight to witness. And this film finally gets the character of Peter Parker right. Though I would probably say that Homecoming is easily the best film of this trilogy, I would also say that this film is the best Spider-Man movie. Again, the fact that Peter goes from someone else in the previous film to the quintessential version of the character in this film is jarring and weird, but I am still glad to see Holland's Spider-Man actually grow from a teenager to a mature adult who understands the tragic weight and responsibility of being Spider-Man, who shows empathy for the villains because he sees them as human beings who deserve a second chance, capable of redemption. And I just fucking adore how they handled Tobey and Andrew in this film. This was something that could have gone so easily wrong if not handled well, and I still remember just how fucking relieved I felt when I saw the film for the first time 4 years ago, that they got their characters right too. I love that in the scene where all the three Spider-Men meet for the first time, it's not a light-hearted and happy moment where they all geek out over each other. We get that fan service stuff later on, but I love and respect the fact that they all bond over their shared trauma and burden of being Spider-Man. that Toby and Andrew open up about their mistakes and insecurities to pave the way for Holland's younger Peter. It's just one of the few Hollywood blockbusters that gets fan service right. It gives us what we asked for, but in a way that's a natural part of the story while never losing sight of the main narrative and characters. The cameos and references do feel awkward in terms of the filmmaking, but I'm also a big nerd with childhood nostalgia who's easy to please when you bring his favorite superhero back on screen. Another thing I adore and respect is that ending. It's an incredibly bold and sad way to end the film and is honestly the perfect way to conclude the story as it's true to the character and what he stands for. Selflessness comes at a cost, and it's nice to finally see a Holland Spider-Man film that treats consequences with actual weight. A film that perfectly depicts the tragedy of Spider-Man and the difficulties and sacrifices that come with being a superhero. All in all, as I've said time and time again, I love this movie, flaws and everything. It's fascinating because at times it does feel like a studio mandated product, but it's also a film that made me feel strong emotions. It still managed to move me because the love for this character permeates throughout the story. It's not my favorite Spider-Man film, but it's honestly one of my favorite recent Marvel movies. Eternity. I always had a feeling that I would like this film, and I'm very glad that I was right. This was every bit as delightful and entertaining as I had expected, but the scarily slow dread and existentialism weren't things I had expected to feel either. The film looks absolutely gorgeous with some of the best production design and world building I have seen all year. Seriously, I was so immersed in this world, I just felt like visiting it if it were real. But all of this is grounded in an engagingly simple yet fun story with 3 solid lead actors who are entertaining and moving in equal measure. Even the charming supporting cast really liven up this already delightful movie. The film isn't perfect, it does get a little clunky in the second half with unexpected twists and turns that left the film feeling a little unfocused while still being surprising in moments, and it does run the risk of breaking its own internal logic in service of the emotion, which again is not a huge issue for me, though it is one of the weaker aspects of the film. But given everything, this was tons of fun to watch. A lovely film about ordinary love and the beauty of imperfections. I had a great time at the movies. It felt like I was inside the cinema hall for an eternity, and I mean that in the best possible way. And the final movie I saw this month, the 20th movie, is Spider-Man Homecoming. This surprisingly aged even better than I imagined. I had so much fun rewatching this in theaters. Maybe it's just because of the state of superhero movies today that it felt so refreshing to see a Spider-Man movie that's grounded, no world-ending stakes, no multiversal problems, just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man who's looking out for the little guy. I would love to see that in Brand New Day, given that they've already done a whole back-to-basics reset for the character. And as for this movie, I genuinely believe that it is one of the strongest entries in the MCU. Holland is wonderful as Peter and Spidey, the comedy mostly works, and Peter has a solid character arc that perfectly fits a younger version of this character living in a world where superheroes already exist. Plus that Michael Giacchino score is a banger, and so is the staggeringly good VFX that rarely feels artificial. Even the action sequences are entertaining and creatively executed. Despite me loving this film a little more upon rewatch, I do still have some issues with it. Mostly every character except Peter is barely fleshed out. They are played by really charismatic actors, making them somewhat memorable, but their writing is paper thin, which results in them leaving little to no impact ultimately. I would have liked for the film to explore class difference a little more due to the motivation of the antagonist. Vulture is a solid villain, and there was some untapped potential there for Peter to question his billionaire idol. Though I don't love how the Vulture is connected to Tony more than Peter, it's an issue that even Far From Home shares, honestly. Plus, though I'm not in love with the idea of a Spider-Man having this much tech, I'm glad they cleverly incorporated into Peter's arc. I honestly can't think of a better way for the MCU to introduce Spider-Man in their universe. This film sets up its characters well and gets us to care for this new iteration of Peter Parker. And as most people agree, Homecoming is the best of the Holland trilogy, though I would argue that No Way Home is a better Spider-Man movie. This is easily my favorite out of the 3 films in terms of the stellar filmmaking and the focused storytelling. And with the direction Marvel has now headed with Peter, I am honestly incredibly excited to see Peter's journey in Brand New Day. I'm really hoping that that film knocks it out of the park. So yeah, these are all the films that I watched in November, 20 films, and since I saw Bāhubali the Epic and Bugonia twice, I technically went to the theaters about 22 times this month, which is just insane to me. And what's also insane is that if you don't count the re-releases, this actually would have been a pretty simple month for me. I think around 10 movies or so. But because of the re-releases of several older films, the amount of times I went to the theater this month just grew exponentially. But either way, I'm not complaining because I had a wonderful time, even though it wasn't so easy on my wallet. And these are the films that I saw in November, and these are the new releases. Now, usually I rank them, but I just really don't know how to position these films next to each other. So, here are the new releases. And since I watched pretty much every single live action Spider Man movie this month in theaters, this is my Spider Man movie ranking, including the Spider-Verse movies. So thank you guys for watching. I will probably make a video for December, even though I'm not expecting to watch that many movies in December. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. And until next time, I will see you later in the next video. Bye bye.